You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, Mr. Bob Harris and Mr. Kyle Dvorchak. Gentlemen, it is week 19, if you will, divisional weekends, 4 games. And I will say this, they're all good games. Like outside of the fact that the Patriots are gone, when you look at all these teams, they're good football teams.
I mean, I think these games are even better.
Yeah, and obviously it's stupid because it's the playoffs, so it's like, of course, they're good teams, Justin. But when you look at all these teams, they do a lot of great things. And if any of them won this weekend, you really wouldn't surprise us outside of Tennessee beating the Baltimore Ravens.
Would not surprise me any more than it surprised me that they beat the Patriots, a game that I picked, Justin. There are a couple storylines with the Patriots, of course. Joe Judge, the special teams coach, hired by the Giants, a bit of a surprise there, I guess, for everyone outside the world. But you kind of almost wonder why a special teams coordinator has not gotten more head coaching looks just from around the league. I mean, I think the last one was Dave Tube from Kansas City got a little run, at some point. But look, they work with everybody, right? They're not just offensive guys. They're not just defensive guys. They have to get players to fit, that are various players. And look, John Harbaugh's had a great deal of success as a head coach and usually in a copycat league. So I thought that was interesting. But the real Patriots question here is, number one, how much did you enjoy watching Mike Vrabel get Bill Belichick down and give him the business, Belichick style, with the draining of the clock?
We saw we knew it was going to be a good football game in the trenches, just not enough from Bill. It was nice to see Mike Vrabel. You got to see Mike Vrabel as a Patriot. He was your typical Bill Belichick player, disciplined, hardworking, and very talented. And in fact, there were times where he lined up inside the 5 and on the goal line, scored a hell of a lot of touchdowns for the Pats. So he got a little dose of his own medicine. And kudos to Mike Vrabel. I mean, I think the three of us thought that the Pats were going to win that game. And then,
no, the two of you did. One of me did not.
Yeah, you were more optimistic about the Titans. It's just
I picked them to win.
You did, and the Titans, they built with Derrick Henry this year. Not much out of Ryan Tannehill did absolutely nothing. And I thought the game played. If the Titans were going to win that football game, they had to do exactly what they did. And Derrick Henry got the football a ton.
That was joyous. Now, a lot of moving pieces here. Josh McDaniel will interview for the Cleveland Browns, the only remaining opening. So I'll just go ahead and throw out that in addition to Judge going with the Giants, the Dallas Cowboys signed Mike McCarthy. We'll talk about some of these things more in depth. We'll maybe do a few off-season episodes and dig into these situations. And in addition, Matt Rule was hired by the Carolina Panthers, and boy, what a press conference they put on. It was like wow, very enthusiastic, these kids. Anyhow, I digress. But Tom Brady's future, Justin, just quickly, give us your best guess.
So what more do you need in life, right? You get the money, you have the accolades, you're selling your property up the street from where I currently reside. You've stepped down from an organization locally ran that works with like the challenged. You're going to take a wider spectrum, like a national view there. Like, what more do you need? But it seems like he's a competitor. He's pumping his TB12 brand. He said today, which I think was a business move on Instagram, kind of playing chess with Bob Kraft in terms of, look, I'm going to be an unrestricted free agent come March, pay me, or I'm going elsewhere. So a little chess there. It seems like he's going to play. Would I bet tonight that he's returned to the Patriots? I'm getting the vibe that he is no longer wanted in New England, partly because of Bill Belichick. I think Bill thinks that he could do it without him at this point in time. That's it. It's the arrogance. That's the mastermind in Bill Belichick. I could envision, and we've seen it with numerous greats, Montana. We saw it with Brett Favre. We saw it with Peyton Manning, going elsewhere and finish your career there. It's tough as a guy that's seen him do this for 20 years. But it's business. 3 of us know that. And if you're no longer welcome, which I think is kind of the case here, then I think the party could be ending. But he's in shape. He's pumping his brand, And, you want to kind of live up to the expectation to help pump your personal brand. I could see him playing elsewhere tonight if a gun was to my head.
Yeah, let's say, Kyle, and I'll bring you in on this a little bit. But number one, I feel like Bill Belichick's smart enough to know you don't move on from one quarterback without having another. I don't know that he has another. So I think that's a big factor when everyone sits down and calms and figures it out. And I do think that Bob Kraft would probably pay what it takes to keep Tom Brady around for another year. And I also think if I'm Tom Brady and I could see the desire to win a Super Bowl without Bill Belichick, just like maybe Bill Belichick would like to win one without him, I don't know that that's the best chance you have to win a Super Bowl. And if you're Tom Brady and you don't have a lot of time to play, maybe there's only one place, Kyle, that would maybe offer you that kind of opportunity. Maybe it's a team with 3 quarterbacks with uncertain futures, and that'd be New Orleans, where Drew Brees, they think it seems likely he's going to return, but he'll need to get paid. Teddy Bridgewater needs to get paid. Taysom Hill needs to get paid. He needs to get paid a lot more, Taysom Hill, for no reason other than I want to see him get paid more. What are your thoughts on this situation, Kyle?
I would say, yeah, I think it's rather, I guess for the New Orleans side, it's rather unlikely that Drew Brees leaves. I would say more so even than Tom Brady. And for Tom Brady, I don't he wasn't, his receiving core was awful this year, no doubt, but he still was not very efficient anymore. I don't think he was throwing the deep ball nearly as well. It's just for me, it seems like watching him and looking at his stats, I don't want to say he's done because he's still a very adept game manager. But as far as having the number 1 defense in the league by many metrics, I'm not sure how else. Sure, they can add more weapons around him, but I don't know how else the situation gets better both for him leaving and for New England as a team. They're one of the better teams in the league, but they are a long shot away from beating teams like Baltimore consistently or the Chiefs. So, yeah, they can add receiver help. That's one thing they could do. I'm just not sure how they get better, but I'm also not sure how Brady finds a better team. They're kind of gridlocked into each other, I think.
I think that's the point. I think it's going to be hard to separate when they all sit down and sort out and get past the emotion of a disappointing season. I think all cooler heads will ultimately prevail because those guys all have some pretty cool heads.
But here's the thing, and I'm sorry to interject.
Go ahead.
If you're a poor organization, and we know, and you've stressed this for years, that there is a need in the NFL for competent quarterback play at the least. Now, if you get a 42-year-old Tom Brady, some of these organizations or in organization, he is going to fill your stadium every single night, despite the hate that surrounds the Patriots as we speak. So from a marketing standpoint, a brand standpoint, look, there are teams, and there's a lot of bad teams in the NFL, where if he went there just by the names, for namesake alone, he's going to help you pump merchandise, which is a huge thing. And the same goes for Kraft, and Kraft could be looking at it like this too. Gillette Stadium was a desolate place for a long time. If the 3 of us were to go up there right now, you see shopping malls and Cabela's, and there's movie theaters and there's restaurants. And that is in large part to what's going on from Kraft to Belichick to Brady over the last 2 decades. So if you remove Tom Brady, unfortunately, I do think that they become the 8-8 Patriots for the foreseeable future, or 9-7 Patriots at best. So it would be interesting to see where he does land, but I think he's going to fill every single house just because of the name that he has.
I would agree with that, but I would also suggest you're a year away from another beautiful man, Trevor Lawrence, being available to fill his shoes. And trust me, the Patriots will figure out a way to make that happen. But beyond that, well, plenty of time to speculate on these things in the offseason as well, the coaches. We do have another 4-game slate this week. I think it's as exciting. I thought last week's slate would be pretty good. It kind of outdid my expectations, maybe not in terms of scoring, but certainly in terms of excitement. And Josh Allen, get it together, kid. That first half was brilliant. That second half, some bad mistakes, but a lot of promise for his future. And the Saints, they'll be back and rebound fine. But I just said the Eagles get healthy, and a lot of issues in these games. But the 4-game slate this week, Minnesota starts on Saturday. Minnesota at San Francisco. Stephon Diggs dealing with an illness. My guess is he'll be fine. It's Wednesday. Adam Thielen working with a sore ankle, limited early in the week Wednesday. Tennessee at Baltimore Saturday night. Mark Ingram seems like a legit question mark. I suspect we'll have some Gus Edwards talk in case there is no Mark Ingram here at some point. For the Titans, pretty much status quo. I don't think Adam Humphries will be back, and beyond that, nobody of great interest. Houston and Kansas City. Injury issues remain unchanged for the Texans, in that Will Fuller, a guy who makes this offense better. The numbers have reflected it. Point totals go up, yardage totals go up when Will Fuller's available. There was optimism last week that he would be ready this week. Now it seems like not as optimistic for Kansas City. Travis Kelce was limited to open the week Wednesday. I don't think there's any real concern there. Then we close out with the Green Bay Packers entertaining the Seattle Seahawks Sunday evening. No major injury issues there that we didn't already know about. Seattle's got some offensive line issues. So do the Packers, by the way, but it sounds like Brian Bulaga will come off his concussion okay. He's already working, and I think their center's having some issues. For Seattle, it's Mike Iupati, missed last week's game, should be back. Dwayne Brown, we'll see about that. So there we have it. The slate's laid out. It's a nice narrow band, and I hope everyone was very successful last week. As successful, Justin, I know you're like in The Bachelor or part of The Bachelor or well known as a Bachelor.
What can I say?
Not much, other than you did not win the Millionaire Maker this past week, and it's probably because you did. Oh well, you didn't collude with me. That's why we're not.
Nobody's gotten paid yet, so
that's true. So little controversy in the DFS world. We'll leave that to the controversy makers. We'll jump into the slate. I'll start with you, Kyle. And we'll start with the quarterback position. Who you like, who you don't like. Where are you going?
Yeah, so at the top, Lamar Jackson, probably my favorite player I maybe have ever watched play. There are very few players who play the way he does, and as productive as he is, set all of the records for rushing as a quarterback and awfully efficient as a passer as well. 8,400 is a steep price when you can get Patrick Mahomes at 7,500. He's probably who I'd look to in cash, but I guess if the Gus Edwards news opens up, maybe that's a way you get up to Lamar Jackson, and if you can, by all means, please do so. Outside of that, in tournaments, I think we're going to get a very concentrated amount of ownership between Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. So not only does paying down differentiate you in terms of who you're playing at quarterback, but if you really do pay down, that's multiple thousands of dollars to pay down for Lamar Jackson, you're going to get, by necessity, a different roster construction by paying elsewhere. So for me, I do want to pay down in tournaments, and I still think you've got guys like Jimmy Garoppolo has 3 games of 4 touchdowns this year. He is one of only 4 players to do that. Lamar Jackson being one of the other ones. But he's got also pretty defined weapons, especially in his receivers, so it's easy to stack him. He's one of my favorite tournament plays. And then, Baltimore is a great defense, but Ryan Tannehill's been incredibly efficient, and now he's going to be passing a lot, I would imagine, as a 10-point underdog. And I'm looking at him below 5% ownership. So really, that's the biggest sells. We've seen his playmaking ability both through the air and on the ground, and he's nobody's going to be on him. And that's really what's important in taking down these large tournaments, is finding good enough plays that have that type of ceiling that nobody's going to be on. So I like those guys, and then I guess one last one, Russell Wilson.
Yeah, a little foreshadowing for me in the DFS 3 and out this week. There might be some Jimmy Garoppolo in there. So, Justin, your quarterbacks, how do you see these 8 guys?
I can't disagree with Kyle. I mean, what Lamar Jackson's done all season with practically nothing. When you think about it, it's a team that's going to run the football. We know that. I think if Mark Ingram plays, which hasn't practiced, has been dinged up, that gives them another weapon. But he's been doing this with just about Mark Andrews and splashes of Hollywood Brown. By the way, Kyle, we did make a bet with Savvy Kelly preseason about Herndon over Mark Andrews. I hope you cashed in. I have Andrews over Herndon. Savvy took Herndon. We were all over Mark Andrews preseason. That has been the proverbial safety blanket for Lamar Jackson. So it's going to be Jackson. Does what he wants. Mike Vrabel's defensive minded. We saw it. I think, it would behoove him to spy heavily on Lamar Jackson. Keep your eyes on him the entire game. But he does what he wants on the field. So there's no sense in getting away from Lamar Jackson at this point. I think you could get a discount in Patrick Mahomes, who, you guys know how much I love him and loved him last year. Arrowhead is a tough place to play. Came back down to earth this year a little bit. Still probably the face of the NFL with Lamar Jackson over the next couple of years. As far as I would tend to agree with Jimmy Garoppolo at home. The consistency hasn't been there, but he does fit the bill for tournament play. The weaponry with Deebo Samuel, Emmanuel Sanders, and obviously George Kittle's there. But this is a football team that wants to run the ball, as well as the Minnesota Vikings. So I think that's going to be one of those games where it's going to be more fought in the trenches. As I called it, the Eagles Seahawks game was more of punching match as well. I can agree with the Garoppolo thing. I'm going to pay up for Lamar Jackson. And then one more name I'll throw out. I mean, how do you go against Aaron Rodgers at Lambeau Field? It's just, we're talking about one of the greatest quarterbacks in history, has gotten in sync recently with Devontae Adams, which is he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. The ground game is there with Aaron Jones. So Aaron Rodgers has showed us year in, year out, when he clicks, his ceiling can be just as high as anybody's. In Week 7, he shredded Oakland at home and almost dropped to 50 burgers. So at Lambeau Field, in the frozen tundra, I think the Seahawks are somewhat overrated. I think they're a good football team, but they certainly have their deficiencies. So it'll be Jackson, Garoppolo, Aaron Rodgers for me tonight.
Deficiency, something we all have. And I'll just chime in on Lamar Jackson. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The key here with Lamar Jackson is the faith the Ravens and their coaching staff have put in him. That entire franchise from top to bottom has invested in this guy, not just, financially putting the pieces around him. There's been financial investment, but just total buy-in with his skill set and what he does and the things that make him unique. They're cashing in on without fear, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we all sit here, he's going to get hurt. They don't care.
And where's the talent around him? I mean, when you look at that talent, Hollywood Browns.
I think they built, they're running through the talented players, the tight ends and the running game. So I think that's the thing. They're using the things around him, and they'll build the receiving core further. But I think that Marquise Brown is the kind of weapon that works for him, right? A guy with great speed that gets down the field. He can move around. He can hit them anywhere at any time and make big plays. So I think going forward, that's a good deal too. So let's move on to the running backs. And on Ingram, I talked to Terry Ford, local radio guy, today in Baltimore. He feels like, and we're recording this Wednesday night, there's no Tuesday practice for Ingram, no Wednesday practice. He feels like if Ingram is not practicing Thursday, we won't see him play, and it will be Gus Edwards. So that might be a little something to watch for on Thursday, the practice situation. Calves are tricky, guys. I mean, the calf injury does not go away quickly, and it's vital to a running back. Anytime you push off, you're at risk of hurting it worse. So we'll see how that plays out. So all that being the case, Justin, you kind of run through your top plays this week.
So obviously you have Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook at the top. I'm going to side with Dalvin Cook because of his ability to catch 4 or 5 passes every single week. And as the Minnesota Vikings offense goes, it's going to be through Dalvin Cook. Now they have the weaponry in Adam Thielen. Of course, he's banged up. You saw last week with Adam Thielen healthy and creates madness to a defensive coordinator, because now you're talking about 2 top 15, top 20 wide receivers in the NFL healthy. I'll culminate that with Dalvin Cook, he is the identity of that offense. Kirk Cousins is more than capable of slinging the ball if he has to, but again, that offense is built to run. So I could see myself facing Derrick Henry, because the Ravens know that if the Titans are going to win, they're heavy underdogs, it's going to go through Derrick Henry. Load the box. He's looked like Eddie George used to look down in Tennessee, shades of Earl Campbell, just carrying people on his back, but somewhat one-dimensional. You saw that in New England with Ryan Tannehill. So to make an argument to fade Derrick Henry, play Dalvin Cook. Again, PPR site being DraftKings, Dalvin Cook is arguably the best running back in the NFL by my estimation, with Christian McCaffrey. If you're going to go now and even talk about a team that likes to run the football, Aaron Jones for 7,400 has shown us a high ceiling any given week. His involvement, they're committed to the run. He's also involved in the passing game. I think they want to use him and ride him. I do like Aaron Rodgers, but I like Jones more this week. So I will probably go there. You're saving money there. I'm a little more confident about the pieces on the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle defensive line and the Green Bay Packers offensive line. The Packers are clicking on all cylinders as far as I can see. I'm going to pay down. There are a good amount of value running backs, in my opinion. I think the one guy we should look at is Carlos Hyde. Little retaliation. The Chiefs were, bye-bye, Carlos. When you look at Carlos Hyde's numbers, gentlemen, and I'm looking at them, 261 attempts this season, over 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns. That is kind of what the Niners expected to get out of him several years ago. Bill O'Brien wants to run the football. Their offensive line is not terrific, as we see Deshaun Watson hit the deck often. But I could see myself using Carlos Hyde in somewhat of a revenge narrative against the Kansas City Chiefs, who, by the way, they're bottom 5 run defense team. They're I think they're giving up over 125 yards a game this season. So I could see myself having some Carlos Hyde on promise 15 to 20 touches.
I wonder the matchup. The Chiefs been playing some pretty tough pass defense, so it does make some sense to maybe try and establish that run. Kyle, how do you see it?
Yeah, so for me at running back, I guess we can start with Houston. Not awfully interested, but if you do think Houston can hang around, which Vegas would say that's rather unlikely. Houston are 10-point dogs, and that line has moved significantly since opening. So, but if on the off chance you do think they can hang around, which they did in fact hang around and win, I believe it was a 7-point game when they met earlier this year. Carlos Hyde got going in that game, and it makes sense if Carlos Hyde is running efficiently that you would want to continue to run him because that keeps Patrick Mahomes off the field. And also when they are winning, they tend to run Carlos Hyde a lot. He's like the typical game script dependent back. So yeah, if you think they have a chance of being in the lead, Carlos Hyde makes a lot of sense. And if you're stacking Deshaun Watson, like if you're running Deshaun Watson stacks, that is, Duke Johnson also makes a decent amount of sense. But for me, I guess I would just throw out like two guys Justin didn't name or didn't touch on a ton. Damian Williams, I think, is probably the best points per dollar play on the slate. He's finished over the past, like, basically half a season. He's been pretty banged up. But when he is healthy and he starts and finishes in the game, they just ride him. Like, LaShawn McCoy has been a healthy scratch twice, and I believe it was week 17 where he didn't touch the ball at all. He was essentially a healthy scratch. And they don't trust Darwin Thompson at all either. Like, they've only given him a decent amount of work in complete garbage time. So with that being said, you've got 4 games in the second half of the season that Damian Williams started and finishes. He's averaged over 18 touches per game, over 100 yards per game, and scored more than a touchdown on average in those games. Like, he is a 3-down back on the best, or I guess probably second best offense in the league. I don't know how you get away from him at 6K. I'll probably be overweight on him in tournaments, and I'll be all over him in cash. On top of that, Raheem Mostert, I think, like a much more thin play because he's part of the 3-back committee, but he is, or at least has been, the leader of that committee. He's been over double-digit carries in 5 straight games, and like no Tevin Coleman or Matt Breida has gone over, I think, 7 touches in that same span. So he's clearly the guy, and they are, I believe, 7.5-point favorites at home. You're not getting nearly as much guaranteed work, especially when you look at the market share of touches to go around. But I think in tournaments, he's going to be under-owned relative to his ceiling, which we've seen. And I think he scored in like 6 straight games, too. Like, on an efficient offense as a whole, as a guy who could get reasonably 20 touches if they are, like, working with massive lead, I like him in tournaments. He's probably not close to my cash game lineups because he has so much competition, but I think he's still a tournament play.
Yeah, I would. I buy all that. And by the way, on Aaron Jones, a little note: the Packers are like 6-0 when they have a running back run for 100 yards, whether it's Jones or Jamal Williams, and I think they're 7-0 if you throw in the 100+ yard receiving day that Jones had this season as well. So good reason for them to lean heavily on the running back who scores lots of touchdowns. Let's jump into the wide receivers. Kyle, you go.
Yeah, so like there are some kind of obvious plays up at the top. Like, you know, you've got Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill at 7,600 and 7,800, both of them very good plays, and I think up at the top is where you'll find some of the better value, honestly, at the position. But for me, this is a great tournament slate. So you're having a lot of these massive boom-bust guys at reasonably low ownership. I mean, on a 4-game slate, you're talking less than 20% is reasonably low, but like A.J. Brown at 6K just absolutely crushed people last week, but that's because they played the Derrick Henry runs out the entire game. Like, that was their game last week, was just ride Derrick Henry. As 10-point dogs, you just feasibly cannot do that unless he's going for multiple, like, 40 to 50-yard touchdowns. And even Derrick Henry doesn't put up multiple of those every week, so, like, you're going to have to throw the ball, and A.J. Brown burnt anybody who played him last week. And, like, you know, could stacking be more obvious? On the other side, they have a guy with the same name, Marquise Brown. And, like, he's super underpriced, and I think he's going to be, like, only reasonably owned. Like, I think he'll be moderately popular because of his price. 4,400 on DK is just a bad price for a guy with his upside. But I still don't think he's going to be chalky by any means. And I think he taps into the Lamar Jackson upside without having to pay nearly as much. Because you can see a game where Lamar Jackson goes for 30-plus points, and because of how prohibitive his price is, he just doesn't make the optimal lineup because Jimmy Garoppolo at 28 is a better value and allows you to pay up at other positions. So I like going with like an A.J. Brown, Marquise Brown stack. And then I'll just mention one more, Will Fuller. I'm looking at like roughly 15% ownership for a dude who I believe has like a top 10 all-time DK performance this year. Yeah, and could he go out there, assuming he plays? If he doesn't play, obviously don't play him. I feel like that doesn't need to be said, but don't want that heat coming back on me. That's not on me. If he does play, he could go out there and pull his hammy in the first snap and give you a 0. In tournaments, I don't really care. He's got 200-yard upside this season alone, and he's going to be under 20%. He's going to be under 15% owned, I think. And he's only 5K. Like, he is the ultimate. He's the best tournament player. He's your tournament player's tournament player.
That's a fair point, Justin. Go.
Yeah, when does Will Fuller play, right? But he's going to certainly help, arguably, the best wide receiver in the NFL being DeAndre Hopkins. Again, the script sets up for the Texans to be down. DeAndre Hopkins going ham. Although Arrowhead is a tough place to play, but the script sets up for DeAndre Hopkins. Kind of, he's number 3 here in terms of price. People are going to be keen on Tyreek Hill, but I mean, Tyreek Hill is that ultimate boom or bust type of player. I think he's a player that you could probably fade because he could have a 4 reception, 50-yard game. Could also have a 40 point game as well. I feel like Devontae Adams is one of the safest wide receivers to play every single week in the NFL. You know what you're getting. You're going to get between 10 and 15 targets every week. The rapport with Aaron Rodgers, unprecedented, kind of that Julian Edelman, Brady feel when these two guys are on the field at the same time. I think he's a lock for 20 points, and I'll probably have Devontae Adams in every single lineup that I have. If I'm going to stack, I think you could use Alan Lazard, who, the name has come up a couple times this year. They liked him. Week 17 against Detroit, had a touchdown, 8 targets, but outside of Devontae Adams, I think Lazard is that guy for Aaron Rodgers in the passing game. It would behoove us, again, if we like Jimmy Garoppolo, I think Kyle's dead on as far as the value there. We're going to have to make a decision with Emmanuel Sanders or Deebo Samuel. I want the guy that Xavier Rhodes is covering, which is probably going to be Deebo Samuel, although I feel week to week more comfortable with Emmanuel Sanders based on the history of him. I think it breaks my heart to see the Patriots didn't grab Emmanuel Sanders, but he'll probably be getting paid this offseason. So there's a decision to be made there. Tonight, it's probably Emmanuel Sanders, a little more expensive, but I have more confidence with Sanders, although I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game in San Francisco. I think it's going to be a game fought in the trenches. Another decision we're going to have to make is going to be, I'm kind of disregarding the Adam Thielen and Diggs based on their health right now, given that it is Wednesday night. It's who are we going to play? We're going to play DK Metcalf or we're going to play Tyler Lockett, because I think one of those guys is going to have a day. A lot of people are going to gravitate to DK Metcalf, given what he did last week. I don't know if the Bachelorette will have him again, but it could be a Tyler Lockett week. My friend Matt Harmon's been talking Tyler Lockett up for what seems like a decade. Doug Baldwin leaves. Tyler Lockett kind of assumes the slot role, in Seattle. Not a big guy, but man, he's doing what we expected him to do over the last couple seasons, 86 receptions, over 1,100 yards this year. So it could be Tyler Lockett week. As far as A.J. Brown, and I'm talking about everybody, I think it's a great tournament player with the other Brown. And I would tend to agree where if the Titans are going to win, it's going to be because of Derrick Henry, but they need to do something else. And I think that something else is A.J. Brown. Although I did hear that Saturday is Corey Davis's birthday. So we have the birthday narrative going. Haven't thrown in the towel completely with Corey Davis. I think he's a fantastic wide receiver. Just been screwed with inconsistent quarterback play in Tennessee. Right now,
he's had consistent quarterback play since week 6, and what has he done?
That's true. But I mean, his career as a whole, not a lot of continuity there. But you're right. I mean, A.J. Brown is clearly the guy. I think another guy, Matt Harmon, talked up in the offseason. Given the birthday narrative, he's a dart for me. And as of tonight, I'm not looking at Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs. But if you're going to stack that game, it's going to be Dalvin Cook or in Adam Thielen or Diggs Cook, because we've seen both of these guys go off. But Diggs' ceiling's about as high as anybody's, and Adam Thielen over the last couple of years, when healthy, has been as consistent and as good as any wide receiver in the NFL. But they're both ailing. I mean, do you expect both of them to play this week, Bob? I mean, it doesn't sound great for either of them, but I mean, again, it's only Wednesday.
I'm not going to get too caught up in anything on Wednesday. I don't think those guys. I think my only worry this week is Ingram. I think look, we're not going to see any of the Titans wide receivers beyond. I don't think we'll see Humphreys, Khalif Raymond will be back, I'd say. But I mean, do you trust any of those guys?
Well, I'll tell you what. I can trust Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen if I'm guaranteed they're both.
Yeah, I was going to say they're playing. They're playing. One early week illnesses mean nothing. And,
I think the only frontline player that I would have concern about this week at all is Mark Ingram. None of the wide receivers, and Will Fuller, I think, is a legitimate every week issue. This, despite the optimism of last weekend, that basically everyone said, "Look, he's not going to play this week. That's so he can play next week." I would not bank on him.
He's your perfect tournament play. Will Fuller is like your perfect
and he'll stay that way, and you can pivot to him or not as we get the inactive announcement prior to the game. But beyond that, I think everyone will be on the field. The Vikings for sure. All right, go to the tight ends, Justin.
Well, the Sea of Mediocrity has some studs at the top of the water this week, and I wouldn't talk anybody out of using Travis Kelce and George Kittle, right? I mean, these guys are centerpieces of their respective offenses, good offenses, and they're not priced through the roof. I mean, Travis Kelce, 6,400, George Kittle at 6,200. I mean, these are guys, if you don't want to play some of the wide receivers I talked about, I think there's stability when you talk about these guys, and they're probably a sure shot if these teams are going to win to be a big part of why these teams won. So Kittle's probably a lock for 15 to 18 DraftKings points in my estimation, and Kelce's the same way. We talked about Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson not having many weapons. The one weapon that's been dependable all season long has been Mark Andrews. At 5,600, if you don't feel like spending 6,400 or 6,200 for Kittle, you're not saving a ton, but it is a swerve. The masses will gravitate to Kittle and Kelce for the namesake. But when you look at the Ravens offense, again, especially if Mark Ingram doesn't play, I mean, the usage for Mark Andrews, you should be looking at between 8 and 10 targets this week. I'm not going to stray far from any of these guys. I mean, you talked me out of Kyle Rudolph, but he's somewhat of a disappointing season, although he's had 7 touchdowns. I mean, Kyle Rudolph is your epitome of mediocre in the Sea of Mediocrity. So I don't, 3,400. I've given up on Geno Smith. I like his talent, but he's broken my heart over and over. So I'm gonna pay a premium for tight ends this week, whether I have 1 or 2.
That makes sense. Kyle, who do you like?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Justin, which is awfully surprising. It doesn't happen very often, but this week...
It's kind of disturbing, huh? It makes it feel funny, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm doing things right anymore, but I mean, truly, if I'm we're on the same position as for this one too. If I'm on Jimmy Garoppolo, which I definitively am going to be over the field on Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle controls so much of this offense in terms of the production, both yardage and receptions, that you almost can't play Jimmy Garoppolo without playing some George Kittle. So I'll have a lot of George Kittle. I think we'll probably be under the field on Kelce just because I'm going to take a stand on one of the 2 high-priced tight ends. The only player I am paying down for significantly is Jacob Hollister at 4K because, like with Jimmy Garoppolo, I do like me some Russell Wilson this week. I mean, I always like some Russell Wilson. And I think he's going to be, I think we're going to have a tier of ownership that is Travis Kelce and George Kittle at the top, probably 30% or more owned, I would say at least 25. Mark Andrews probably closer to 20 to 30% owned. And then the drop off from that's like 70% right there. So the drop off from that is going to be steep. And anytime you can make that big of a pivot, I will be doing so in some lineups. I don't know about all of them, but and that pivot for me is only Jacob Hollister. I can't really get myself into any Jonnu Smith or Darren Fells, none of these guys, Jimmy Graham or Kyle Rudolph. I won't play any of them. So Jacob Hollister, on the other hand, has been pretty decently involved in the offense, and this is an offense that hasn't done a ton of scoring as of late. So if they are forced to go into Green Bay and score a lot of points to hang with Aaron Rodgers, I expect them to throw the ball a lot, and I think that's a good thing for Hollister. So he's probably the only guy I'd be paying down for this week. Outside of that, it's a lot of Kittle and probably underweight on Kelce.
I paid down for Hollister last week. I feel really good about it. So defense is not really that great about it. But I did have some Metcalf, so I was good there. So looking at the defenses, I look at the Chiefs' pass defenses has improved and gotten better. The pass rush is great. The pass rush of the Vikings, horrifying, according to one Drew Brees. Kirk Cousins liable to shrivel up and curl into a little ball at any given time on the big stage. Didn't last week. Maybe he won't get this week. But who do we like for defenses? Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, on a small slate, most of my defense is just like whoever I am not playing. I don't have a ton of Minnesota. I think in games where I stack, like Jimmy Garoppolo, I'll probably run it back with Dalvin Cook, so I won't be playing the San Francisco defense. But in games where I just have, like, I think I'll have a lot of Raheem Mostert San Francisco defense stacks. They're not that expensive. They're 3K, but they're pretty large favorites. They're like the best defense in the league in terms of, I think they're like a top 5 DVOA defense. They are number 1, tied with a few other teams in yards per play allowed. Like they're just one of the best defenses in the league. They're big favorites at home, and there's a good correlation play in my opinion with Raheem Mostert. So that's probably where I'd be going. After that, it's just like teams I'm not stacking. So in games where I don't play a lot of like Houston, if I'm not stacking that game, I think Kansas City, a defense that looks improved over last year and over the second half of the season even, I wouldn't mind them going against Deshaun Watson, especially with the sack equity that gives you. And I think that's another easy stacking option. Stacking with Damian Williams and call it a day. So I think those are probably my 2 favorite plays the more I talk about them.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess, for me, it's worth noting Quan Alexander sounds like he'll be back. I don't know that I would expect a huge game out of him. Going to be a coach's decision, but we saw kind of the emotional lift that J.J. Watt's return gave the Texans defense last week, and it wouldn't be surprising if Quan Alexander didn't come back and give him that kind of boost as well. Is that enough to sell you, Justin, or are you looking elsewhere?
I'm looking at the Green Bay Packers at home. They have been pretty stout, and they've been pretty consistent. Look, we love Russell Wilson. He is your pro's pro, but there's been nobody sacked more than Russell Wilson this season outside of Deshaun Watson, which is a damn shame when you think about it, gentlemen. These are guys that wear their hearts on their sleeve, and but they hit the deck more than anybody. I mean, banged up front. I love the Packers defensive line this week. 41 sacks this season. I think they're short shot for 10 DraftKings points. I'm fine with that. 2,800. You go way down. I suppose you could use the Texans at Arrowhead with J.J. Watt back at 2K, but Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. They're not a bad defense. You're not going to talk me off the Chiefs. I think they're gelling at the right time. I feel like dollar for dollar they're the safest with the Packers. And look at the Honey Badger. I mean, you want to talk about retaliation? This is another spot for the Honey Badger. We forget what he did at LSU and just kind of thrown around the league, and his talent is unquestioned. I think he had some character issues a few years ago, kind of pieced his life back together, and that's translating on the field. And I think he's become one of the top 4 or 5 safeties in the NFL at this point. So he's going to be pissed off on the Kansas City Chiefs, have their work cut out for him as far as the DeAndre Hopkins of the world and if Will Fuller plays. But Chiefs, Packers tonight, and I'm not going to stray too far from that list there. I will say, and I will agree with the Vikings, they're another team that have come together, and they're stout everywhere besides Xavier Rhodes. I think that's a game where great defensive football game is going to be fought in the trenches, a lot of running the football, despite there being talented wide receivers on both sides. I don't envision it being a shootout.
Fair enough. All right, there was some good information there. And everyone will set fantastic lineups. They'll confer with the Bachelorette and make sure that they have all their lineups in line for draft.
Just make sure fiance's there.
Make sure the fiance's in on it too. And if you don't know what the hell we're talking about, Google it up. Bachelorette, DraftKings, all very entertaining. And beyond that, let's wrap it up and call it a night and get ready for a great divisional playoff weekend.
Yeah, I love it. For myself at Kyle Tweets here, for Bob at Football Diehard, and for Justin Lonero, you can catch all of our work at footballdiehards.com. That's it. We will catch you next week, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.